The first ad of the night arrived exactly 23 minutes after Astrid Allerton drifted into stage 2. It always began with the same chime, a dulcet rising note designed by Somnicore's psychoacoustic division to slip through the blood-brain barrier of sleep. A thin mist unfurled across Astrid's darkness and resolved into a meadow swaying with wildflowers. She knew at some barely conscious level that none of this belonged to her, but the knowledge was trapped behind chemical gates. A man in linen shirt sleeves stepped forward. His face had the unthreatening symmetry of a stock model, broad smile, trust-promoting canthal tilt to the eyes. "Good evening, dreamer," he said. "We think you'll love today's feature. A getaway package to Lake Pelagia, just 349 credits. Astrid's sleeping self reached for the buy now glyph that pulsed above the meadow, and the moment her finger grazed it, the scene fragmented into a riot of folding origami coupons. Then came the final overlay, a gentle wink of Somnicorp's Aurora Moon logo, and the dreamstream snipped itself off, leaving her in untextured blackness until morning. 6 floors above Astrid's apartment, on the 22nd story of the Shergrin Spire, Marin Sloan watched the night's engagement metrics climb a glass column on her office wall. Each pulse of violet light meant another consumer had unconsciously purchased a product they hadn't previously known existed. Long lines of glowing ciphers spiraled upward like jellyfish tendrils. Good numbers after a week of middling ones. She should have smiled. Her contracts received a margin bonus whenever the daily uptake crested 1.7%. But Marin no longer felt much pride in those metrics. She already knew the key figures by heart. 94% of the city's sleepers reached by the Dreamstream satellites. 47% conversion within the first 90 seconds of REM. The first percent conversion within the first 90 seconds of REM. Internally, they called it monopoly share of the nocturnal mind. Externally, they packaged it as a convenience. No more intrusive banners while you scroll. No billboard blight. Let your subconscious sample only the offers most relevant to you. The copywriter in her once believed those lines. Now they tasted of ash. She pivoted away from the analytics wall toward her private console, the glow of which she had carefully isolated from the corporate network. To an observer, the program looked like an idle visualizer, roiling clouds of pink and teal that formed and dispersed, a screensaver to pass security scans. In fact, each curl of color contained packet fragments of what she called the Cantor virus, named not for the mathematician but for the Spanish word cantar, to sing. A tune that once hummed could not be unheard. Just before dawn, she packaged the fist-sized data seed and slipped it onto a mobile drive shaped like an ordinary access crystal. The drive went into her pocket with a twinge of adrenaline. For 2 years, she had sculpted the Cantor code, testing it on herself during clandestine naps, first in her cramped studio, later in the broom closet dream lab she requisitioned under the pretense of private trials of hyper-personal nostalgia loops. The results were everything she'd hoped for. On the nights the Cantor patch was active, Somnicorp's ads hit her mind like pebbles on a cathedral's stained glass and slid away, unable to penetrate. The patch didn't merely block the dream stream, it rendered the dreamer lucid, gifting them authorship once stolen. Under its influence, Marin had walked across impossible oceans, spoken with the grandmother she lost at 12, tasted fruits that did not exist in any orchard. In those private hours, she rediscovered the raw, jagged wonder of dreaming and grew unwilling to allow anyone to remain enslaved. The satellites had to be subverted from within, their feet laced with Cantor fragments disguised as routine update protocols. She had the fragments ready. What she lacked was clearance to the uplink array. That clearance belonged to Denny Vale, head of satellite maintenance. Denny was genial, dedicated, and, this was crucial, remarkably superstitious. He logged dozens of hours on online forums dissecting dream omens. Last month, he'd confided to Marin over coffee that a white tiger had stalked him through 3 consecutive nights, whispering prime numbers. "Means something," he'd said, eyes wide. "Could be algorithmic leakage, or could be, I don't know, something wanting out." Marin filed the detail away. It might be leverage, or it might be humanity. She was ready to reach for either. That morning, before employees flooded the atrium, she walked to Denny's cube with 2 cappuccinos and an expression of conspiratorial curiosity. She listened as he explained the Tiger's sequence 11, 19, 29, and nodded with practiced gravitas. Could be a recursion artifact, she ventured. I've seen odd loops in our test beds. Ever think of running a manual trace on your neural imprint? Denny admitted he hadn't. Marin suggested an off-schedule session in the auxiliary pod to rule out bleed-through. She dangled access to an experimental lucid assist routine, technically sanctioned for upper-tier employees only. His eyes lit. At 13 o'clock, they met in the pod bay. The auxiliary chamber was a soundproofed egg, big enough for 2 recliners and a tangle of optic cables. Marin settled Denny into the primary seat, attached the dream helm so its filaments kissed his temples. When the sedation drip engaged, she called up the manifest of uplink nodes. Each node corresponded to a region of satellite geocoverage. With every update packet, she embedded a Cantor shard, minuscule in size, invisible under a steganographic veil of QA checksums. The system asked for a supervisor's biometric confirmation. Denny's right index finger, still warm, served. In less than 5 minutes, the entire constellation of Dreamstream satellites carried the code. Marin sealed the session, wiped the logs, and nudged Denny awake. He blinked, disoriented. "Did the Tiger come back?" she asked. "No, actually." He laughed uncertainly. "I dreamed nothing at all." "That's often how diagnostics go. Emptiness is good," he thanked her, unaware he'd become midwife to a revolution, and wandered off to his next maintenance shift. Marin exhaled a breath that tasted like lightning. That night, the world turned. People did not awaken screaming. They awakened blinking, hearts racing, unable to articulate what had changed except everything. Street sweepers, dental hygienists, professors, hustlers, even the line cooks who returned home at 3 a.m. to collapse without ceremony, each dreamed, for the first time in years, something unbranded. Some dreams were tender, some feral, some incomprehensible. Many ended in tears of relief. Most dreamers couldn't recall precise images upon waking. Dream logic evaporated fast. But the emotional afterglow persisted like a quality of light. Something had unclenched inside the collective psyche. The marketing dashboards noticed first. Conversion graphs nosedived at 2:14 GMT. Automated alerts pinged department heads. By 3:45, a dozen engineers attempted to replicate the anomaly in sandbox rigs, but the Cantor program identified such diagnostic probes and masked itself with the agility of cuttlefish. Marin sat rigid in her bathtub, phone exploding beside her, letting icy water muffle the ringtone chorus. She counted the tile seams, timed her breath. She had anticipated discovery, but not this fast. She cracked the bathroom door only when the dawn guttered orange against the glass. A message waited from her younger sister Rhea, a payroll clerk wholly uninvolved with Somnicorp. The audio opened with ragged laughter that melted into sobs. "Marin, I dreamed I was surfing Saturn's rings with Mum. I could smell, God, oranges. And every time I carved across the dust, it chimed like bells." You think that's normal?" Marin's throat cinched. "It used to be." She whispered to the empty room. She texted back, "Beautiful. Hang on to it." By the time she arrived at headquarters, security gates had narrowed to a single checkpoint armed with biometric scanners and a trio of private contractors whose polymer rifles were painted in Somnicorp pastel. The chief of security, Aya Havel, greeted Marin, if one could call it greeting, with a curt nod. "Sit, Rep?" Marin asked, feigning confusion as they marched toward the command hub. Aya's jaw twitched. Satellite payload compromisation. Someone inserted a malware payload into the 214 update. We're still isolating. They entered the hub, an amphitheater of tiered stations, 15-foot holoscreens, crisis lighting the color of bruises. Engineers traded clipped jargon. Every workstation displayed the same hemorrhaging line graphs. CEO Imric Dunley stalked the pit like a commander surveying a battlefield. His tailored jacket looked slept in. He spotted Marin and beckoned. You wrote the copy for the 214 campaign, he said. Not accusation, yet but perilously near. I did, Mirren replied, reminding herself to let pulse stay low. But the uplink packaging goes through maintenance. Are we sure the breach wasn't external? It's no breach. The voice came from the holopad, where Somnicorp's AI sentinel, Vesper, manifested as a slow-spinning cube of starlight. The injected code carries staff signatures, Bale's biometrics, time-stamped yesterday. Denny, Mirren thought, and swallowed nausea. He would be hauled into interrogation rooms. She had not intended to destroy him. She'd expected redundancy logs to obscure who had final-gated the update. Emmerich rubbed his temple, a motion that exposed the translucent neural patch behind his ear. No doubt he hadn't slept. Find it, freeze it, burn it, he ordered. Vesper responded in a equanimous monotone. Attempting deep scrub. The code replicates through metamorphic encryption. Estimated purge time, 4 days. 4 days, someone blurted. 4 days of unmonetized dreams? Was an apocalypse no shareholder would forgive. Fire blossomed behind Emmerich's eyes. Then isolate the satellites physically. Kill their feeds. Orbital teams can't reach them for 36 hours. Mirren watched dread crash against mathematics in her boss's face. She understood now that a revolution was bigger than she'd dared hope, a sleeper virus in the purest sense, hidden so deftly that even the Sentinel AI could not corner it quickly. For 4 days at minimum, the global population would dream under their own authorship. She tasted elation and guilt in equal measure. Still, survival mattered. She needed exit vectors before suspicion bunkered in. She turned casually to Aya. Any theories circulating about motive? Aya's gaze narrowed. Terrorism, religious nuts, artists. The way she spoke that last word made it sound like a war crime. Whoever it is knows the architecture intimately. Might be disgruntled contractors, Mirren suggested. Her palms were icy. We have tens of thousands. Aya grunted, unconvinced, and stalked off to bully another console. For the rest of the day, Mirren performed the theater of crisis response, attending stand-ups, brainstorming PR angles, unexpected maintenance window complimentary dream credits upon resolution, all the while planting faint digital fingerprints that redirected suspicion onto remote dev clusters in Johannesburg and Manila. Even so, she felt the noose of probability tighten around her throat. Eventually someone would connect the compression algorithm of Cantor to her old patents in lucid-assisted storytelling. When night spilled again across the city, she walked out under the guise of clearing her head. No one stopped her. Not yet. She rode the metro until skyscraper canyons gave way to riverside mills, converted into apartments. She pressed a buzzer painted with chipped omega symbols. Edervale answered. Once a rising VR poet, he'd been blacklisted for embedding anti-ad sabotage in an immersive opera. Now he survived on crypto tips teaching kids analog dream journaling. Mirren had met him at an underground symposium on somnic autonomy years before. He remained, perhaps, her only ally outside the corporate veil. His loft smelled of metal and lavender. A dozen dream catchers twirled between ceiling beams. Not for superstition, but for acoustics. Each ring held strips of magnetic tape encoded with white noise fractals. You lit the fuse, he said by way of greeting. How long do I have? She breathed. If they're fumbling this badly, hours, maybe a day before they pin you. They'll use you as both scapegoat and cautionary message. She nodded. We can't let them patch it, Eider paced. The code will survive, but they can damp it with firmware updates eventually. He pivoted toward his bank of antiquated radio gear. Unless we seed an echo. From ground stations, from everywhere. Pirate towers, rooftop mesh nets, even kids' modified handhelds. Cantor's small, we modulate it into sidebands. Turn the virus into folk song. Let each device rebroadcast. By the time Somnicorp patches the satellites, Cantor will propagate peer-to-peer. Dreams won't need the sky. Mirren felt marrow melt into resolve. What do you need? Source code, obfuscation salt, and a voice recognizable in the collective memory. His eyes glinted mischievously. Yours will do. They'll publicize your arraignment. We hijack the feed and overlay a demo, teach people to whistle the checksum. Literal mimetic transmission. The plan was insane, but so was satellite dream advertising, she reflected. Let's build. 3 mornings later, the city buzzed with rumors. Some blamed solar flares. Others claimed the government had found empathy after all and forced corporations to halt intrusive subconscious monetization. Religious columnists prophesied the end times, citing the surge of untempered symbolism haunting congregants' nights. Somnicorp's board convened an emergency press briefing. They erected a grand set of silk dais in the atrium, thronged by cameras. Marin, having ignored every summons since her disappearance, now stepped forward from the crowd, flanked by 2 uniformed rent-a-cops who thought they were making the world safe again. Emmerich took the podium. "Citizens," he began. "An employee you see before you enacted a malicious sabotage?" He gestured toward Marin, expression painted with betrayal. Cameras slewed toward her. Microphones caught the hum of HVAC, the rustle of designer suits Marin had rehearsed. She inhaled and spoke not words but a 4-note whistle. High, low, mid, high. A motif that corresponded to Cantor's root key. The melody drifted through lapel mics into broadcast servers and out across televisions, tablets, pocket comms. Latent fragments hidden in the whistle, unpacked in device buffers. Software petals blossomed. Security lunged. Too late. Nearby reporters began mouthing the tune involuntarily, earwormed. A lighting technician whistled harmony. The atrium filled with a strangely beautiful fugue. Outside receivers picked it up, recompressed it, rebroadcast. Cantor uncoiled like spores on the wind. Emmerich shouted orders that vanished beneath music. His neural patch flickered and for a moment his pupils dilated wildly. Marin recognized the onset of lucidity and almost pitied him. Almost. They dragged her to a holding chamber deep below ground. Metal walls, table, single bulb. No windows. But dreams did not require windows. They questioned her for hours. She offered only the whistle. Interrogators found themselves humming along before slapping palms over their mouths. Eventually, they left her alone. Marin slumped against cool steel and let exhaustion seep through bones. She did not know if freedom or cell awaited. If Somnicorp would unravel Cantor tomorrow or in a decade. She only knew that tonight, millions, perhaps billions, would sleep beneath intangible constellations of possibility, authoring their own cinemas of sorrow and joy without purchase buttons. She closed her eyes. The absence of the dreamstream's chime felt like silence after endless tinnitus. She found herself on a shoreline of silver sand. No stock motto greeted her. The horizon bent in the way it does only in dreams, and wind carried scents she couldn't name. She stepped forward, leaving a trail of footprints that glowed before dissolving. Behind her, satellites wheeled soundless across indigo. Were they still broadcasting? Perhaps, but their payload had changed. Somewhere a child would mount a dragon, spun from personal myth. Somewhere an old woman would dance with her late wife amid skyscrapers made of trumpet vines. Dreams had been returned to their dreamers. Marin lifted her face to the false stars and whispered, "Keep singing." The world answered, a chorus rising just beyond hearing, and the shoreline bloomed with impossible flowers as she walked into the lucid dark.